Hello everyone and welcome to my presentation. Today we'll be talking about pragmatics. So, what is pragmatics? It is a subfield of linguistics that studies the relationship between sentences or utterances and the context in which they occur. In other words, it is the study of how language is affected by the situation in which it is used. Language is affected by many factors. As a start, we have the situation in which we use the language, because of course, the way you would speak in a funeral is very different from the way you would speak in a wedding, for example. Age affects the language greatly because the way older people speak is very different from the youth. The level of formality also constrains the language because the way you would speak to your boss or professor is very different from the way you talk to your sibling or colleague, for example. Gender or sex actually affects the language greatly because the way girls speak is very different from the way boys speak, and vice versa. People don't speak to exercise their vocal cords, they actually communicate something to whoever they are addressing. We, as language users, are able to recognize the type of action performed by the speaker, and this action is called a speech act. A speech act is an action performed by a speaker within the utterance. It could be a question, a command, a request, a statement, or whatever it is. What is a direct speech act? A direct speech act, for example, if you have a question, it has to take an interrogative form. Like, for example, did you eat your dinner? Are you okay? Can you speak English? And so on. Requests and commands have an imperative structure. Like, for example, eat, sleep, open the door please, and so on. An indirect speech act, on the other hand, is when you reverse or mix the two things. Like you have a request, but you use an interrogative form, like can you open the door please, or can you pass the salt please. In these situations or in these two utterances, you're not actually asking or questioning the person's ability to open the door or pass the salt. Of course, he or she can open the door or pass the salt, but you are here requesting that they do this for you using a question form or an interrogative form. Speech acts differ from one place to the other. Speech acts of the same language, some would say that they are similar, but surprisingly they are not, because Arabic, for example, has many speech acts and each one is divided according to dialect. Egyptian dialects, for example, is very different from that of the Syrian. In doing a comparison between both dialects, yes, both are Arabic, but they are pretty different. In asking a simple question, what is that? An Egyptian would say ida, whereas a Syrian would say shuhat. Congratulating a bride or a groom for the wedding, an Egyptian would say ألف مبروك عقبال البكاري, and a Syrian would say ألف مبروك بالرفاء والبنين. Of course, Egyptian dialect has the two, but the first one is pretty common. However, in saying thank you in Egyptian is pretty different from saying thank you in Syrian. If a person says thank you, shukran, in Egyptian, the answer would be alaf. However, in Syrian, the first person would say shukran and the second one has to say alaf ala rasi. It doesn't stop right here because it is considered to be inappropriate not to answer or not to reply to this. If a Syrian man or a woman says afwan ala rasi, the other person has to say tabak ward. Metaphorically speaking, of course, like there's a flower upon your head. Saying excuse me in Egyptian is very different from saying excuse me in Syrian. Egyptians would say بعد إذنك and Syrian would say دستور. Requesting also is pretty different because if an Egyptian wants to say can you open the door please, he would say ممكن تفتح الباب من فضلك. A Syrian one would say إذا بتريد تفتح الباب. It's pretty different and the form is also pretty different because the first one has an interrogative form, whereas the second one is a form of a request. It has an imperative form. That's it. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and it's been beneficial for you. Please, if you enjoyed or you have any comments, don't hesitate and comment below. Thank you.